richmond.org. That's an addition from my side. Now, please join me in the prayer, and then we will follow it up by pledge. May all of our speaker get enough strength and clarity of thought so they become a wonderful speaker today without any hiccups, nothing. So all the best to all of you. Now please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. May I see the flag, please? If somebody, yes, Amy, thank you very much. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And with this, I hand over the virtual lectern to the presiding officer of the day, Amy Gao.
Hello, everybody. This is the closest thing I've got to a football jersey. You said to wear a football jersey.
That's right.
This is my closest thing I've got. So I long for those days of the Southwest Conference. This is dating me from way back when. But that was it seemed much more simple back then, where you were playing people within your state, crosstown rivalries, across the state rivalries. I thought it was much more fun way back then, and at least you knew people who went to those schools, and there's a lot of too much football to keep up with these days. There's the people start looking at the football drafts and the trades that are happening, and all this fantasy football and sports betting has just amplified everything, where people bet on football and you don't even have to know anything about football to bet on football. So I don't understand all this stuff. And I wish I was back in the simple Southwest Conference days. Tonight, we've got an experienced and talented Toastmaster to quarterback our meeting. And he is also in the sports broadcasting business. So no fumbling tonight.
That's right.
Fall is just around the corner. And in Texas, that means it's almost football season. High school, college, and professional football is set to be a part of the sport and cultural landscape for the next 5 months. Our Toastmaster tonight never played football, but enjoys watching and gets caught up in the festive atmosphere that accompanies the big game. Please help me welcome Daniel Foyt, EH2, and our VP of membership as our Toastmaster tonight as we all talk about football. Take it away.
All right. Thank you, Amy, for that great introduction. Competitive professional sports teams are popular around the world, and their traditions, the fans that follow those teams, part of what makes up the fabric of society. It unites people all over the world. And it was fun just recently with the Olympics. We saw how that played out every day for a couple of weeks. And we also see how the coverage of professional sports teams plays out in our print media and all of our other news outlets. But if you've ever made a visit out to the United Kingdom lately, no doubt you've run into some English football fans supporting teams like Manchester United, Man U, Arsenal, Chelsea, Liverpool, and of course there's Manchester City, which has won 5 of the last 6 Premier League championships. My favorite team down there on the bottom corner is the Southampton Saints. They just barely eke by and are not relegated to the lower ladder. We are still holding out hope that they're going to have a year to remember, but it hadn't happened since I've been following them. And if you've watched popular TV shows, you know Ted Lasso tells you just how serious English football fans take their sport. And even now, many of those games are on TV here in the United States. You can wake up Saturday or Sunday morning and watch Premier League's games on NBC, and you can even go to a couple of sports bars in Dallas and tune in and join fellow fans in cheering on a lot of Premier League teams. And football's even popular in Australia. They have the Australian Football League. It's a little different set of rules. And tonight, as we speak, the Sydney Swans are perched at the top of the ladder in the AFL rankings, which they do. I think there's 18 teams and they list them from top to bottom, best to worst. But my favorite team is the Collingwood Magpies, and that's what I'm wearing. That's who I'm supporting tonight. Collingwood Magpies, right now they're sitting at number 11, having kind of a tough year, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about them later. But football is, or what we might call soccer, popular all over the world, even in South America, against that backdrop of rowdy fans and rabid supporters for Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, probably some of the more recognizable teams you've heard of. But the rivalry game I like to watch or think about is the Boca Juniors and River Plate. Both are the two teams that represent Buenos Aires in Argentina. And River Plate is more of the team for the elites. Boca Juniors are more of the team for the downtrodden. And I like to think of it kind of as the Dallas Cowboys versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. When those two teams get together in Buenos Aires, it is impossible to get a seat unless you're a season ticket holder. And believe me, I tried. It is impossible. Boca Juniors, by the way, play in the smallest stadium in that league that they're in. And it's kind of interesting. They're called the Juniors. That's just the name of their mascot. It has nothing to do with them being a junior varsity team or anything like that. It's just that's their name, the Boca Juniors. But I'm leaving out a lot of other big soccer and football teams all over the world where the sport is popular, namely the FC Barcelona. Always has a big fan base. They've played a couple of games here in Dallas, and lots of people will turn out to those games. There's even a Mexican league of soccer, football, what we think of as soccer, and they'll play a few of their games in Dallas. And routinely, they'll play at the Cotton Bowl. 30, 40, maybe even 50, 60,000 people will show up to cheer on some of those teams in the Mexican league. It's pretty awesome. But it's August and it's football season here in the United States. Football season's right around the corner. Of course, our favorite pro team, the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe you've heard of them. We'll be talking about them a little bit later. But they kick off the regular season September 8th against the Cleveland Browns. And so tonight, yep, we're talking football. And before we do that, going to introduce our program team because can't have a Toastmasters meeting without some support, just like you do on any kind of a football team. And our word master grammarian tonight is one Pursutum Kosick. Pursutum, what exactly is it that a word master grammarian does, and do we have a word of the day today?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. I definitely know what word master and grammarian does. And I have a confession to make. I fumbled because for some reason, when the email came out for the meeting, I thought I'm an accountant, so I never sent you the word of the day. So thank you very much for selecting the word of the day. Word of the day is fumble, which is the verb, which means you are just being clumsy on the field, missing your catches, missing your passes. And example of the sentence is, his fumble was recovered on the 6-yard line. If you are a cricket fan, we have a saying, catches win the matches. And some of the closest game in the World Cup has been won by the extraordinary catches. So in cricket, you don't fumble. If you fumble, everybody is staring at you and the whole nation is, I won't say hating you, but not liking you. India has won 3 World Cups. Out of those 2 has been based on the pure, simple, wonderful catches. So I know fumble is very bad. Apart from that, I will be a grammarian for the evening. And grammarian for the evening, I will be looking for the correct uses of the language, incorrect uses of the language, or the impressive uses of the language or phrases. So that will be my role. And I will let you know my finding once called upon during general evaluation. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you, Pursuit. Thank you for explaining what it is that a word master grammarian does. And what's the next job? Oh, it's the awe counter. And our awe counter tonight is when Donovan Miller. And, you know, I've always thought if you just had to look at someone's name, Donovan Miller would be a wide receiver, I think. But Donovan, tell us, what does a awe counter do today?
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Fellow Toastmasters, as the awe counter, I'll be listening for distracting forms of speech from any of our speakers. This can include crutch words such as ahs, ums, ers, repeated words, or pause fillers such as and, but, you know. There'll be no instant replay, but if you fumble your words, I will be making a note and I'll remind you at the end of the meeting when called upon. Mr. Toastmaster.
All right. Thank you very much, Donovan. And we have a timer vote counter, I believe, tonight, and that would be one Helen Mayo, who will be taking notes and adding it up. And Helen, tell us about a timer vote counter's role. What does that all entail?
Well, tonight, the only thing that I will be timing is our table topics. And table topics are 1 to 2 minutes. So I will be showing this green thing on your screen at 1 minute. And 1 minute, 30 seconds, you would see the yellow. And at 2 minutes, you'll see the red, and you have 30 seconds to wrap it up, or you will be disqualified. And for my vote counter, everyone has, since we're all online in Zoom, I would like you to use the chat button, and you can go ahead and open that up, and then you'll see it on the sidebar to the right. And instead of saying to everyone, go ahead and message me privately and just put in your vote, and then I will tally them. And I will report my findings when called upon at the very end of the meeting. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
All right. Thank you much. Thank you, Helen. There you have it. There's our program team for tonight. Looking forward to this, especially the rest of the meeting and table topics. But before we do that, I want to talk a little football. Rules of American football, pretty complex. But even aficionados of the sport have a lot of arguments over what is a proper interpretation of a football rule. And it was especially true even in Australia with Australian rules football. You can hit them below the waist, but not above the waist. And there's always lots of discussion about whether or not that was a legal hit or not. But we're not going to get too much into the rules of the sport because let me just say, basically, you're moving a ball up and down the field and trying to gain or lose ground. That's in American football. It's kind of the same, even with any other kind of version of football. And the comedian George Carlin, he described American football as two teams line up against each other, beat the heck out of each other, and take their land. And I think that's a pretty good description. I like that description. But I've grown up in Texas and I've been in Texas all my life. I followed football, and I've been lucky to live in some football hot spots like Odessa, Texas, which is home to the Odessa Permian Panthers. And they've won a couple of state championships. Longview, Texas, where I went to high school, home of the Longview Lobos. Austin, Texas, where I went to college and lived there for a long time, home of the Reagan Raiders. They were a powerhouse back in the 60s. And the Westlake Chaparrals have just been a powerhouse for as long as I can remember. And here in Dallas, our own South Oak Cliff Golden Bears and the Highland Park Scotties, two of the high school teams that have had a lot of success as of late. And I know I'm leaving out a lot of them. Schools like Allen and lots of other schools have had just a lot of success in high school football. There are so many that it's hard to name them all, but lots of good coaches and a lot of good players have come out of Texas. But I love high school football. It is one of the most inexpensive forms of entertainment on a Friday night. You're seeing athletes perform at a young age, right as they're starting off. And I like the bands and the drill teams and the cheerleaders, and it's all part of the Friday night magic that plays out in small towns and big towns all throughout the state. Now, college football, a little different. There's a long-running argument, and you'll get into this. This is a great bar argument anytime you're talking about college football, is what is the game's biggest rivalry? And you can make a good case for Michigan, Ohio State, Army, Navy, Alabama, Auburn, all of those great rivalries. Florida, Georgia, and USC against UCLA, and then of course, there's Notre Dame, and that's Notre Dame playing just about anybody is going to be a rivalry game. And I'm not really in any of those camps, because my favorite rivalry of all is the one that happens here every October in Dallas, and that is Texas and Oklahoma. And I've attended my share of Texas OU games at the Cotton Bowl during the state fair. It's really unique. The stadium is split, half Texas burnt orange and half Sooner red. Players grow up dreaming of playing in that big game. And it's always funny in that game. It's always seemed like there's a player that nobody knew about, has no name, but he ends up changing the trajectory of the contest. And in that series, that's what he's always known for, is making a big play during that one game. But college football has gone through a lot of changes over the years. In the past, we would have kind of a mythical national champion. Player or coaches and sports writers would determine a national champion by a vote. It wasn't determined on the field. Then a few years ago, maybe 15 years or so ago, they came up with this plan to take the top 2 teams and let them play for the championship. And then maybe 7 or 8 years ago, they came up with the idea, well, let's take the top 4 teams and put them into a playoff, and that will determine a national champion that way. And this year, it's going to be the first time ever they're going to allow 12 teams into the tournament to determine a national champion, crown a national champion, as you were. This is an experiment. We'll see how this is going to play out. Sometimes, there's going to be 12. There's always going to be teams that should have been in there that aren't. There's probably going to be teams that are in there that shouldn't have been, but that's just the way it's going to go. And we'll be seeing this play out through December and January for the first time this year. So football's lots of fun, and just like these guys are in the playoffs are going to have to do, they're going to have to pivot. Going to have to be thinking on their feet just like a football player does. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in Table Topics. So our Table Topics master for tonight is as much more of a basketball fan as it turns out than a football fan. Despite having spent 8 years on the sidelines of football games throughout high school and college. I can't wait to hear about that. But one fact about Heidi Jordan, who's our Table Topics master tonight, is that she participated in one down of an NFL game. And due to that experience, she'll never root for the New York Jets again. Boy, that's a story. Please help me welcome to the virtual lectern our Table Topics master for the evening, Heidi Jordan. Heidi, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. I'm so excited to be with all of you this evening. Welcome all of our fellow Toastmasters. And yes, Dan, there is a great story behind one down of professional football in the fall of 1996. I have gone back and searched, hoping that somebody captured it on video. And if there's time, I'm happy to share at the end. I won't take up too much time at the beginning, but I'm happy to share my story of my one down of professional football that, yes, I will never, ever, ever root for the New York Jets, ever. So, Amy, I so appreciate your comments about the Southwest Conference. Having gone to school in North Carolina, I'm very much an ACC purist. And was in college when the ACC was truly the Atlantic Coast Conference. When they put Florida State in, I thought, well, it's not great, but at least they're on the Atlantic Coast. And then they stuck in schools like Notre Dame. To your point, Dan, Notre Dame is nowhere near the Atlantic Coast. And then they put Stanford in. Stanford is the Pacific Coast the last time I looked at the map. And so to me, putting colleges in the Atlantic Coast that are not truly on the Atlantic Coast is one of the biggest fumbles that was made in the ACC in a long time. But that's a whole separate soapbox that I will not get on for this evening. When I think of football as a fall sport. To Dan's point, yes, I spent 4 years in high school and 4 years in college in the stands, on the sidelines, when it was 1,000,000 degrees outside, when it was pouring down rain. There was 1 year in college, we went to Georgia Tech, and literally the sky just fell out on us, and we were soaked. Could not wait to get back to the bus. And then they turned the heat on, and all these wet polyester uniforms, it just became this sauna inside the bus with all those wet uniforms. I've been to football games when it is freezing outside. And for the record, even if you wear a layer of spandex under polyester, it still doesn't keep you warm. This year, the NFL preseason, and I had to look this up because I am not a self-proclaimed football fan. I had to look this up. The NFL preseason games this year started on August 1st. August 1st. To me, August 1st is still the summer. The first day of fall this year is technically September 22nd. And so the NFL main season is going to start on September 5th. And Dan, I looked it up. I didn't write it down who the teams that are playing on the 5th. I know there's a series between the 5th and the 8th, but the big kickoff is going to start right after Labor Day. Okay, after Labor Day is still kind of fall-ish, but it's still technically starting in the summer. So Chris Yang, what do you think about football season starting what seems to be earlier and earlier in the year? And should football really go back to being a fall sport?
Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master, and fellow guests and fellow Toastmasters. When Daniel picked the topic football, now that I'm really honed in on my hobbies and what I like and what I don't like, I used to kind of dabble in a little bit of everything. I knew a little bit about baseball, a little bit about football, a little bit about basketball. But at this point in my life, I'm just not the right person to talk about football. Everything Dan talked about, he might as well talk about the football that you kick with your foot, and I still would have taken it as football nonetheless. Your original question was, what if we were to, what's the deal with pushing football earlier and earlier? If it has anything to do with the weather being a little bit cooler, which it wouldn't be if we push it earlier in the summer. So sitting in the stands and watching the games and everyone in band, right? Everyone on the sidelines, everyone playing the games. I mean, there's a risk for heat stroke. There's a risk for, players fainting, fans fainting. So in my mind, if it helps in that way, this is probably not the first thing that would come to mind. But if it helps the players, I would go against pushing the season back further into the summer. And that's all I got. So I'll take it back to you, Madam Table Topics Master. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the perspective. So I did not grow up as a football fan. My dad never watched football during the year. He might turn the Super Bowl on just because it's the Super Bowl, but we didn't have any sports on really at my house at all as a kid. Baseball, basketball, you name it, it just didn't happen in my house. So I didn't really get a whole lot of exposure to football until I got to high school and joined the band. And then you have to learn about football whether you really want to or not, because you're there, to Dan's point, every Friday night. To this day, I can't tell you a whole lot about football strategy. I know that there are running plays and there are passing plays. I'm still really trying to figure out the whole point of running plays, because it just seems like the guys line up and they snap the ball and everybody falls down. And you might gain a yard or two, but most of the time you're not making a whole lot of forward progress. It seems like you get a lot more bang for your buck with running plays than or passing plays than running plays. I can see the point of a running play when you're right there at the end zone and you just have to push the guy over the line to get him into the end zone to score. But other than that, I'm just surprised that the passing plays are not used more frequently. So Sarah, Dan gave us his interpretation of this a little bit earlier. But if you were going to explain football to somebody who had never seen the game, what would you say are the most important points to understand about American football?
Oh boy. Thank you very much, Heidi. The most important points about American football from somebody who occasionally watches the Super Bowl and mostly for the commercials. I would say I would first, I will try not to fumble this, but I would talk about here are the number of people on each side, and then I would talk about maybe here are the rules, here's sort of the main goal, here are the starting points of the goal lines, and I would also talk about here are the interesting the best part of any sport is, besides the teams, the excitement from the cheerleaders, is always the fans. And if it would probably help if there is somebody standing around me who would know a little bit more than I do about football. But the most important part is a sport, and it's a lot of running to and fro, and it is trying to get the ball from one end to the other, similar to basketball where you're doing a lot of running back and forth, but with the same passing as you would in a soccer game, and the same enthusiasm from a UK soccer game from the fans. And that's how I would explain that sport. And thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Sarah. When I was in college, part of the route that the band had to take to get to the football stadium went past the high dollar parking area, where a lot of the alumni with better seats had parking right there next to the stadium. And there were all kinds of different ways that people like to tailgate before a game. Sometimes it was something as simple as sandwiches and drinks out of a cooler. Some people had these elaborate tailgate setups with grills and smokers in the back of their pickup trucks. And it felt like they had streamers and confetti and blue and white chairs that just took up as much space behind the truck as they possibly could, that they had to scoot out of the way when the band came marching down to go around to the far side of the stadium. So Amy, are you somebody who likes to tailgate? If so, what are your best tailgating tips? And if not, what do you like to do before a football game?
Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master. I am not a big tailgater. Ergo, I went to Rice. So, if you know anything about the Rice Owls, we are not the foremost football team, but we also have lots of enthusiasm for our band, the Marching Owl Band, also known as the Mob, who dresses up in gangster hats and fedoras, and they don't really march. They kind of play out a scenario. They usually have a narrator and they're telling a story, and they are kind of sarcastic and make fun of the other team. So there is some marching, but there's also a lot of random funny things and skits going on. As far as tailgating, the most impressive I've been to some of my friends' tailgating locally, like at SMU or something. But the most impressive one I saw was when my daughter went to USC, was watching the people go get set up on campus for their tailgating. They were starting at 5 a.m. with loads and loads of wagons. And by the time we walked through, there's tents. There is cable TV with big white screen set up. There is grills and tables and games and food, and of course, lots of booze. And so we're just like, what is this? But everybody, I guess, goes really early in the morning at 5 or 6 in the morning, trying to stake out their corner or their little space. I'm sure they have to assign spaces, but it was just amazing to watch all this stuff that we had never seen before. And that was, quite a while ago, but USC has very enthusiastic alumni and fans. That's my experience with tailgating, at least observing it. Back to you, Madam Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Amy. I don't think there's any right or wrong way, and depending on the school and the resources and how good your football team is, depends on what kind of tailgating experience you have on campus, for sure. As I mentioned in my experience with football games, going to a game can very much be like a Goldilocks experience. It might be too hot. It might be too cold. It might be just right. When the weather is just right, I often had more fun spending time with my friends in the stands than I did actually watching the game. Now, part of that is because my high school football team was not good at all 4 years that I was there. And college, we did really, really well until Mac Brown left and went to UT Austin. And to this day, I still am very certain that Mac Brown's wife's classic T-Bird looked much better in Carolina blue than it ever would have being painted in burnt orange. She used to let that car come out at homecoming, and the king and queen would get a ride around the stadium on the back of that very, very pretty Carolina blue car. Donovan, do you prefer watching football live in the stadium or at home on the big screen, and why?
Thank you, Madam Table Topics Master. Like you, I spent most of my time watching football in high school and in college on the sidelines with the marching band. Also, like you, in high school, my freshman year, we were 0-10. So the most exciting thing about getting ready for the football game was deciding what snacks you were going to put in your 5-gallon pail with your hat and plume and spats and all of the other band accoutrements that you could handle. In college, and I went to Vanderbilt, so the team wasn't all that great either, but we had a lot of fun going on. We got to go on one road trip a year I remember going to the Georgia game. We lost terribly, but it was such a fun experience. The one place I hated going was LSU because their fans are there's a lot of animosity toward anyone that's not LSU, and that extended to the band. So I would not want to go back to LSU. I don't watch a lot of football now. My dad used to watch football. I'd maybe watch 1 or 2 games a year with him. So I know just enough to be dangerous as far as football, but I don't choose to watch it these days. So the most time I had spent watching football was on the sidelines in person. That's my answer. Back to you, Madam Table Topics Master.
Thank you, Donovan. To your point, in college, being in the band, you really had to know where you were going. When we went to West Virginia, they beat us really badly one year that we actually had a semi-decent team. And the fans rushed the field, and at the end of the game, they started throwing oranges at us in the band. One of the girls in my section took one right in the eye. I found my friend who was a sousaphone player who has the biggest instrument and is one of the biggest guys in the band. And I just kind of snuck in under his shoulder until we got back to the bus to make sure that I was going to get there without being accosted by a flying orange. Georgia Tech, they were a little bit nicer to us. They threw bagels at us instead of oranges. Bagels at least bounce off and are much softer and don't leave nearly the marks that oranges do. So if you're looking for not nice fans, it sounds like don't go to LSU or Georgia Tech or West Virginia. Enough said on that topic. Football games, especially televised games, can take close to 4 hours to play by the time you account for the pregame show and scheduled TV timeouts and the halftime show. I don't usually have the patience, time, or desire to sit through a sporting event that takes 4 hours out of the day. Hence, basketball is much more my speed. You can get in 2 hours, you're out, on with the rest of your day. Helen, I know that you are timing. I'm going to ask if you would like to take one question and I can time for you. Do you like the current length of a football game, or do you think it should be longer or shorter, and why?
Okay, I will go ahead and let you time. I think it's a little long these days. I think they stretch it out. And I actually am a football fan. And the joke was in high school that he had to start dating me because I was the only girl in high school that knew as much about football as he did. So I grew up in a family that watched football all the time. But I think it's stretched out too long. I think there's too many commercials. I think the halftime show is too long. I would like to see it go back to around 3 hours. But for me, if I'm mostly watching the game itself and not all of these little frills, then I'm perfectly happy to invest 3 hours. As a matter of fact, Mike and I are perfectly happy to invest 6 hours because you have to watch the show that comes on in the afternoon and then you have to watch the show that comes on in the evening. And it depends on which teams are playing because I do have a preference from some team to another team. The shirt that I'm wearing is from a Super Bowl that's so long ago. You guys might not remember that the Cowboys were in a Super Bowl game in 1994. And that's the one that I decided. But depending on the teams, Mike and I pick and watch, and I think it's a cool way to spend a Sunday afternoon. And yes, I heard myself just saying, oh, well, that is my answer. Returning it back to you.
Thank you, Helen. Obviously, all of us have many varied experiences of football, either live or at home, whether you've you have a team that does well or doesn't do well, or maybe does well at one point and then doesn't do well down the road. I know diehard fans, it doesn't matter whether your team is doing well or not. You are all in all the time, every year, regardless. And I admire people that have that kind of tenacity for teams that go through phases and seasons just like everybody else does, whether they are constantly getting down the field into the end zone or they are just fumbling their way a few yards at a time. So with that, I believe it is now my time to ask for a timer's report.
And all speakers qualified. Everyone made their time limit. So if people could please go ahead and vote again by using the chat button, and I will record the votes, and I will only cast my vote if there is a tie. So you guys won't know if there's a tie or not. And I will renounce my findings when called upon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. And with that, I'm going to return control of the meeting back to Dan as our Toastmaster.
All right. Thank you very much, Heidi. Thank you for wonderful table topics questions. I got to go to Australia about a little over a year ago and watch these my own Collingwood Magpies take on some team from Sydney at the Melbourne Cricket Grounds. And it was pretty cool being there because if you don't understand Australian rules football, and I didn't understand any of it, you can just turn around and ask anybody who's sitting in the stands next to you, and they are more than happy to tell you how the rules of Australian rules football. And I was certainly asking a lot of questions. But as it turns out, in Australia, you root for two teams. You root for your home team, then you also root for whoever's playing Collingwood. And I didn't know that, but they have been that kind of team in Australia for years and years. Got me to thinking, do we have that kind of team in the States? And yes, we do. And that team is Notre Dame. Everyone seems to have an opinion about Notre Dame football. And they did a poll a couple of years ago to ask, who is your favorite college football team and who is your least favorite college football team? And this might not surprise you, Notre Dame won both categories. But in American sports, professional sports, there's no team that probably epitomizes this spirit, probably better than the New York Yankees do as far as baseball. But in professional football, it's got to be the Dallas Cowboys. Everybody has an opinion on the Cowboys. You either love them or hate them. But there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of in between on all of that. But I grew up as a Dallas Cowboy fan. My childhood memories are some old offensive linemen who you might have read about, Jethro Pugh and Bob Lilly. Those guys were my heroes. They were ran the offensive line for their quarterback, Roger Staubach. And I still remember where I was. I'll never forget this date, December 28th, 1975. Roger Staubach goes back to pass in a playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings and hits Drew Pearson for a game-winning touchdown as the time was running out. They interviewed Roger after the game. He goes, I just went back, threw the ball, closed my eyes, and said a Hail Mary. And that's where the term Hail Mary pass comes from that game right there. But, the Cowboys, love them or hate them, they are still what Dallas is known for in professional sports. Heck, the Rangers won a pennant last year, won the Baseball World Series. The Mavs and Stars have both played for championships in recent years, but it's the Cowboys that Dallas is known for. And after all, that's why they're known as America's team. And heck, I'd be remiss if I didn't even mention the Cowboy cheerleaders are known all around the world. And right now there's even a TV special out about them on Netflix. But history and hoopla do nothing to determine how a team's going to perform on the field. It's been well over 20 years since the Cowboys even played in a conference championship game. The days of Troy and Emmett and Michael, long behind us. The players who are playing for the Cowboys now, if they want to watch any of those three players, they have to go back and watch video of when those guys were playing before they were born. Will Dallas see the glory days of pro football return? Only one way to find out, and that is to tune in, find out, and watch the game and see how they're going to go. So, just like I've been pretty harsh critic of the Cowboys, just like any true Cowboy fan would be in Toastmasters, we also evaluate how we did in our meeting. And tonight, our general evaluator is one, Chris Yang. He's lived in the Lone Star State for almost 6 years now. He probably knows there are two professional teams in the state of Texas as far as football. That would be the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys. But he was born and raised in Midland, Michigan. I want to hear about where that is. After which, furthering his education, he went to Pittsburgh, San Antonio, and now makes his home in Dallas. Chris has been a very sporadic member of Toastmasters since 2017, and he's learned that how public speaking is vitally important in opening doors in life and taking both your professional and personal life to the next level. And he's welcome. And he's excited to become more involved in Toastmasters with his new Hillcrest family. Chris, take it away. Let's hear your evaluation of tonight's meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. And we have no speakers tonight. So correct me if I'm wrong, but we move right into program reports. And first up is the Word Master Grammarian, who's been listening closely to the use of language, the use of the word of the day, and to give us this report tonight is Prashuddham Kaushik.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. And before I give my report, I have a confession to make. I would like to thank Dan for his evaluation of Dallas Cowboys because I have only seen 2 games of Dallas Cowboys. One was about almost 15-16 years back, 2006, around Christmas, and I believe they were playing Eagles at that time, and they lost. I was like, okay. Then I saw another game, Cowboys versus what other team is from Houston, and I believe there is a big rivalry. And I watched that in the stadium, in the dome, with my friend. And Cowboys were leading, and there was a one Houston fan behind me. He was the only one who was cheering for Houston, and everybody was really, really bad toward him. And for somebody who doesn't follow football game, I was like, why? He's a fan of other team, it's okay. But no, people were rude. And from a very comfortable position, Cowboys lost. And my friend who was there with me, and he was like, he was the only person who was right throughout the game, that Cowboys will lose. So I always believe that it's better I don't watch Cowboys game because they lose. But the way Dan just gave the feedback or the critic of Cowboys, I think I should start watching the game because I'm not the reason why they lose. Yeah. So now coming back to the feedback. Word of the day seemed to be a very popular choice or the right choice. Everybody used it. So good job. Congratulations to everybody. Some very good use of the words like powerhouse of the game, like Daniel, like you spoke for majority of the time. So like powerhouse, inexpensive form of entertainment, Friday night, Heidi. I think something with American tradition, right? My daughter always keep on, oh, it's a million degree outside. So same thing like what you said, million degree temperature of heat, sky falling out. Then Donovan, 02 to 10, 5-gallon barrel, animosity, that's the word which I've heard after a long time. Chris, dapple into. So I think overall we did fantastic. Congratulations. Over to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Prashuddham. And up next, we have the awe counter. Those ahs and ums that come out of our mouths while we think of the next thing to say can distract our audience from our overall message. To give us the report tonight is Donovan Miller.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. Daniel, for having spoken the most this evening. You had 5 uhs, 1 2 repeated words. Helen, self-reported, 1 awe. Heidi, you had an and so and an. Sarah, 1 Prosciutto, nothing. I was really listening because I like to point out your flaws, but I did not find any.
Once you are
Chris,
done with this, once
huh?
you are done with your feedback, can I ask for one thing?
Chris, you had, I think, 6 uhs and 1 you know. And those are my findings. Prosciutto, what were you going to add?
No, nothing to add. Just a one observation. In Toastmaster meeting, we talk about ours and arms and all those. Now with election season, we see a lot of people speaking, all the leaders speaking. And since we are from Toastmasters, we tend to catch ours and arms and everything. But it doesn't make them bad speaker. Like people still love them. So why we focus so much on ours and arms in Toastmaster? Any response to that, Mr. Accountant?
I mean, I think even we use it sparingly, but if you listen to, I was listening to someone on an NPR interview, and when it's so frequent that you just can't hear anything else, some people it's like a tick, or it's like a nervous tick. It's constantly every other word, and then once you hear it, like you don't even hear what they're saying. I think we at least, because we're paying so much attention to counting every one, I think most of us are not using them in a way that's distracting, but it's just to help us focus. It's to give us something to focus on. That's my thoughts.
Got it. Thank you, sir.
And back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Donovan. And now just a few thoughts on the overall meeting. Awesome theme that I don't know too much about. As I alluded to before, if you want to talk to me about tennis or UFC, I will talk to you all day, but anything else, I'm just not your guy. What's kind of funny is a lot of my high school friends were still pretty close, and every year we pick a new city and we do the fantasy football draft every year. And they are like the most hardcore sports fans. They can name all the players, like all the plays, the history, how I'm friends with them. I mean, we'll have to figure that out, but they're just the biggest sports fans. And they do trophies and they get together every year. And this year it's in Buffalo. I can't make it due to work, but it's this weekend in Buffalo. They do the draft. We go out, we explore the city, all that. It's kind of like the real life version of The League, if you guys have seen that show, that TV show. But we're all kind of getting to the age where we're getting married and we have kids, which is probably a good thing because yeah, some of these weekends in the past have gotten kind of crazy. So no thrown oranges or bagels though. It didn't get that crazy. So overall, I love the theme. Right off the bat, Dan, you have that headset with the background. You almost look like a sidelines sports commentator, which really fit the image. You talked about football, the soccer sport football, then you transitioned into football, and I was lost either way, but I loved hearing about it and listening to all the history and all the knowledge that you had to speak about the two sports. I didn't have a whole lot to write about. Overall, it was a really good meeting. Prosciutto wanted to thank you for stepping up and taking on the role last minute. You didn't fumble on that one, so that was awesome. And Heidi did an awesome job on table topics. You don't want to leave that table topics playbook laying around because you got some really tough questions in there. So you could probably win the table topics Super Bowl with that one. So overall, the table topics was great. The theme was great. I enjoyed it. Almost fumbled on that question there, but kept it together and that's all I have. So I'll bring it back to you, Mr. Table Topics, or not table, Toastmaster. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Helen, do we have any winners tonight?
May I have a drum roll, please? Ta-da! Our winner for this evening is Amy.
Woo. All right. Excellent. Excellent meeting. Thank you, everybody, for playing along. And Heidi, I'm glad we even got in a Mac Brown reference. I thought that was pretty cool. Well, I love watching football. I'll cheer on my teams this year like I have a personal stake in it. And in some ways, I guess I do, as Amy mentioned, professional sports or televising professional sports is what I have done for a living, although I'm kind of semi-retired at this point. I know I'm going to have my heart broken this year, just like I do every year. Not everybody can win a championship, but there's an old adage, I think, in football and in sports in general, is that the satisfaction and the fun of winning doesn't even come close to the disappointment of losing. And I don't know why that is. It's just the way it works out. But it doesn't matter, though, because any coach worth his salt is going to tell you there's always next year. So that's what we have to look forward to. I'm going to turn it back over to our presiding officer, Amy Gow. Amy, why don't you wrap us up?
Thank you so much, Dan. Excellent theme tonight and covering several sports from soccer football to Australian football to American football. So great job in weaving that in and making it fun. So let's say I give Dan another hand for tonight. And also excellent job to Heidi with all of her prepared questions, lots of questions and hard questions. And thank you for your in-depth evaluations, Chris. I appreciate that too. Is there any new business we need to discuss? I, of course, will talk about dues a little bit. Any other thing?
I can talk about the schedule for next week.
Okay.
We are still virtual. Our Toastmaster is scheduled to be Jen Colosso. Amy, you are Table Topics Master. Prosciutto, General Evaluator. I'll be your Wordmaster Grammarian. Chris Yang, Awe Counter. David Richmond, Vote Counter and Timer. I will need to check with Jen. She sent me an email. I know that she's training for the triathlon. I think she's intending starting September to really take about 12 to 18 months off from Toastmasters. So I need to make sure that she can still, might be a good goodbye for her to do one last Toastmaster role before she takes that time off to train. That's all I have for the schedule.
Thank you so much, Donovan. Prasadam has a comment to make.
Yes, I always have a comment to make. So I must say, when Dan started his presentation today, and he started talking about European Premier League, and I was like, oh God, are we today talking about real football? And I was so much happy, and I was like, oh, it will be fun to talk about real football. Then we moved into American football, and I was like, okay, again, now we are getting confused between football and soccer. Oh my God, then you got my hopes high.
Well, Chris Adam, hopefully next time we'll hear more about cricket then. You can go back to your best sport in cricket and tell us about it.
I know.
At least this upcoming Olympics, they'll have cricket. So you got 4 years to plan that. We'll see if all the cricket people show up.
No, Los Angeles has 4 years to plan that for,
Yeah.
not me.
You have 4 years to convince all your superstars to show up in LA.
No, we have that ship has sailed. I don't believe that the major
They need
stars will be
more money, I think. I guess I don't know.
Oh, more money.
More money. That'll do it right. So
Like,
maybe they want the gold medal. You never know. It's a different type of thing, different type of prestige.
can you believe, like, Indian cricket player, like male cricket player, they don't play in any league. They just play in Indian Cricket League. They don't play anywhere else because they get hell lot of money playing in that league. They are not worried about playing in any league.
Okay. Before we get too late, I just want to let you know that I did send out the dues letter. Hopefully everybody got the dues letter and had a chance to read it. I did go on Toastmasters International, and now you can pay for the whole year yourself. The Toastmaster International part of it, which is you can pick the 60 or up to 120 for 2 periods. So then you just have to pay me later for the club dues. But if you want me to sort it all out, you can send the full amount to me and I will do the stuff online. But just as an option, if you're out and about and can't get the funds to me or Donovan, then you can just use your credit card, log into your Toastmasters account, and just pay for 6 months or a year. So they've enabled that for everybody, and I enabled it for our club. So it should make things a little more straightforward, more secure, and I'll just round up the club dues later from you if you pay online. And at least now they'll send me notices of who's paying online too. Before they were kind of this black hole, so now we'll be able to see who's been paying online too. So,
And
any questions?
I was just planning on sending you a check for $145, and I'm going to send it to Amy Gow, and you'll cash it, and then you'll sort it all out.
No, send it to Hillcrest Toastmasters. Make the checks out to Hillcrest Toastmasters. We have an account, so we will do that. Of course, if you use PayPal and Zelle, that does come through Donovan and me. We kind of paid our account and then paid Toastmasters. But whichever way is easiest for you, we are happy to help. No service fees. And of course, if you pay for a year, we give you a discount on the club dues. If you have any questions, just ping me.
So for a year is 145, right?
Yes, for the full year is 145. For 6 months, it'll be 81. If you've already paid for a full year before, you can go online and see where you're paid until. Also, if you log in, it'll tell you you're paid through. So some of you have already paid through next March, so you don't have to worry about it until March.
I don't think I'm
no, you are not. No, most of us paid in the fall and went through. The older members have done that, and the new ones have come in and they've paid through like March. So
okay. I thought I was owed your money this time.
you owe me money. Any
I owe
other
Hillcrest
questions?
Club.
Yes, Hillcrest Toastmasters Club. Please make the checks out to Hillcrest Toast or Hillcrest Club Toastmasters. Either way, those words. So. Any other questions?
All right, I got to go.
All right, great.
We'll see you.
Everybody, have a great week and take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.